I'm going to take a leaf out of the previous speaker and say that, sometimes we can't understand things intellectually. So let me read you a little portion from Savitri about this supramental manifestation, about the new race, about the new species, about what happens beyond the human. And it's a wonderful passage. I saw the omnipotence flaming pioneers over the heavenly verge which turns toward life, come crowding down the amber stairs of birth, forerunners of a divine multitude. Out of the paths of the morning star they came, into the little room of mortal life. I saw them cross the twilight of an age, the sun-eyed children of a marvelous dawn, the great creators with wide brows of calm, the massive barrier breakers of the world, and wrestlers with destiny in her lists of will, the laborers in the quarries of the gods, the messengers of the incommunicable, the architects of immortality. Into the fallen human sphere they came, faces that wore the mortal glory still, voices that command still with the thoughts of God, bodies made beautiful by the Spirit's light, carrying the magic word, the mystic fire, and so on. So you see, here Sri Aurobindo is actually giving you a description, you see, of this. And then if you read the agenda of the mother, and you read, she talks about the prototype. See, basically, like Plato said, this bottle, how did this bottle happen? Somebody in a factory said, listen, people want water, let's make this bottle. Someone said, okay, this PET is a good material. So now it's carcinogenic, by the way. Okay, we shouldn't be, anyhow, let's not go into that. But you see, somebody thought about it. Where did the thought come from? You see, these things exist somewhere. The prototypes are already there. So we human beings have been created out of prototypes. So the mother was saying she's seen these prototypes of the new being. And these are the descriptions Sri Aurobindo says in Savitri. These children of the new dawn who come streaming down, into this little room. This is a mortal room, so it's very little. But they're wide browed, they're calm, they carry the touch of that mystic fire. So the point is that this new creation is already happening. We can't see it, obviously, but I think we can all participate in it a little bit. And that's why the question about aesthetics comes in, because even here, the next line is, they carry the Dionysian cup of joy. So Dionysius is that god of ecstasy, like our own Krishna. He plays the flute and everybody gets mesmerized. Why? So there is that rasa, you see that. So it is, these come together, that there is joy, there's beauty, there's truth, there's light, and in the new creation these things are going to come together. That's the theory. And when we read Sri Aurobindo, as I shouldn't say all this, but Sachi is my friend, so we have spent a lot of time together. So one day in the morning I was at his house, and then we were about to leave. So he says, just a moment. He takes off his shoes, and he has a portrait of the mother, and underneath is Savitri. So he just randomly opens a page, and he reads a few lines and says, okay, now let's go. So you see, this is the new Veda, and you can read Savitri like that. You don't have to read from page 1 to the end. You read any page, because it's like a hologram. Every 10 lines will give you the totality of the vision, because it is a mantra. You don't have to understand it with your mind. It's a vibration, you see. So you read it and it will speak to you. It will tell you something which is relevant to your life. So I hope I have said something that's relevant to your life. But if I haven't, there are other people.
Well, thank you so much, Makrut. And if you just permit me 5 minutes, as a chair of this session. One is, also, and one quality I have always liked in Makrut is genuineness. He's a genuine person, he speaks. And thank you, Makran, for remembering those immortal moments which must have been at the back of my mind. Thank you so much. And I'll just say 3 or 4 things in a pointed manner in response to what Makran was saying in a complimentary fashion. One is the question that he raised at the end about the science and spirituality. And I can just mention about 2 instances. One is Aldous Huxley. Aldous Huxley, and who died in the 60s, early 60s. And you know, he's one person who nominated Sri Aurobindo for the Nobel Prize. Not for literature and poetry, but for life divine. And 2 of the books that Aldous Huxley had written are in the realm of the so-called fantasy of science, where science can give an answer. One is Brave New World, the kinds of things that he was talking about. And in the 70s, when Kim and I and others were growing up, we had this bestseller by Alvin Toffler, okay, Future Shock, that set the trend of a certain kind. And then the second novel that Aldous Huxley wrote, and he had nominated Sri Aurobindo, was called Island. What really is happening? It's all kinds of fantasy going wrong and aberrations of a certain kind. That's one. The second instance, which is not known even to Aurobindonians, is the collaboration between Paul Richard and Sri Aurobindo. And in 1920, Paul Richard parts way because he cannot accept Sri Aurobindo as the mother does, for example. And then he has a life, afterlife in the United States. And I have been in touch till recently, for example, with his son, Michel Paul Richard. And I've read his book called Without Passport. And I've read his writings also, and especially given by his son. And he said that most of his time, he was involved in experiments and thinking about the coming together of science and spirituality. So there is that kind of trajectory, which is generally not known. He was in touch with Sorokin, he was in touch with Einstein, for example, but because he didn't have an academic background, therefore he was really not accepted by the academia. 3 other things I'll mention. We were speculating about the nature of this supermind. In the Life Divine, Sri Aurobindo says there are 4 things which are pursuing man, like Hound of Heaven, for example, or Francis Thompson. Man is not pursuing God, light, freedom, and immortality. They are pursuing man relentlessly. And then somewhere in Life Divine, he says that you just think of an assembly of the apes in prehistoric days, and they were talking in an animated manner. Can you ever imagine? Somebody said, one of the apes said, you know, we're going to be exceeded by a species called man. And Sri Aurobindo says that all the apes laughed out of it. He said, how can you think of, creature who is smarter than us, leaping from a branch to branch, But that ape went to say that, can you imagine that, we may not have all those tails, for example, but we can fly in the air. We can go to the bottom of the sea. So Sri Aurobindo says, just as it is impossible, as long as you are in the ape consciousness, to think of the coming of this human consciousness. It is impossible, as long as you are orbiting within that ape consciousness, to come out of that stratosphere and imagine that there could be a human being, human consciousness. So he says, when he's talking about man or transitional being, as long as you are in the human consciousness, you can only imagine, you can speculate, and that's what Makran was saying. With the help of our mind, illumined mind, we can imagine. 2 experiences I have had. I must, because we are in the presence of family members, I can say. I've read most through, but I'm just requesting all of you to do. I read last chapters of the Synthesis of Yoga, the supramental sight, and the supramental hearing too. And above all, the last chapter of the Life Divine, called the Divine Life. Please read the Divine Life. I've never had a spiritual experience of the kind that he had. One night I was reading, and I found towards the end, for example, it is not just the cadence of the words. I think, one found oneself being transported completely into a different world. Remember that I am a man of the mind. I earn my livelihood, my bread and butter, through my intellect, and I am very skeptical about these things. But when I read Sri Aurobindo, the Divine Life, in contrast to God's labor, and who in the blue of the sky, in the green of the forest. Whose is the hand that has painted the globe when the winds were asleep? And who is it that and led them to blood? Dr. Karan Singh is very good in remembering. I'm not talking about that. That's about the mystery and miracle of God and existence. I'm talking of the last. And he was, one thing that you know about him. And we are talking to fellow beings here. I'm not talking to a skeptical university audience. Each thing, Mother said, that each thing he wrote in Savitri, it was because of his experience. The words are mantric and they reflect, as Makran was saying, that, in Evening Talks Puraniji, somebody was asking, did you see? He said, Vivekananda came and told me about this, the mystery of the supermind. Then, one of the conversationists saying, did you see him? Did you see him? You remember Makran? Did you see him? So Sri Aurobindo says, yes, I saw him just as I am seeing you. Please read A.V. Purani. People are skeptical. They're asking him. Those who are even close to Sri Aurobindo, in the 20s, they're asking him, did you see him? Skeptical mind. He said, yes, I saw him as I am seeing you. So it is not a figure of speech. So when I mentioned about this, the divine life and all that was happening, for us it's a matter of speculation, etc. But beyond the world of speculation, there is a reality. And I will end my own presidential remark with the last point. Makran did so well to talk to us, and he charted out intellectually about this whole gamut that Sri Aurobindo had written towards the back end of his life. Do you know in 1972, and Anandbhai and Dipshika, we were in Auroville. There was a fire in Auroville, and unexpected fire. And there was a bit of a hippie culture in Auroville. Mother was monitoring everything. You remember we grew up there. 1972, 73 for example, there was an unexpected fire. And you will recall what Mother said, Anandbhai. Mother said, I wanted to create Superman and Superwomen, but you people are living like cats and dogs. Because it is your own propensity towards the lower life, you have invited the fire. So fire is not caused because of, physical causes. Fire is caused because of your impurity. And she was so disappointed. So my point, and this is the point I give to myself, let us be good human beings first, before we talk about changing ourselves into Superman. Yes? Let's be good human beings. I think if you see all around, it's not that humanity is there in Gaza Strip, in Israel. Or for example, the people who shot down that plane, Malaysian Airlines plane for example. It's not they who are the criminals. I think there is a criminality inside us, each one of us for example, which manifests when a colleague does better than us, which manifests when a neighbor does better, when a neighbor's child does better. I think it is no less. That criminality, that egoism is no less. So I think I always tell myself, physician, heal thyself. Mother was saying, the greatest thing, the biggest difficulty, Mother said, to be a teacher, and I am addressing the teachers, she said, to be a good teacher, one has to be a yogi. And I think it's so important that she said. And we have to really turn this back. At the end of the thing, Makran was speculatively saying, some people are going to do this, some people are going to do that. That is his Socratic approach, for example, to make us think, to make us laugh. But I think at the end of today and tomorrow, if, for example, we have a little bit of introspection, and looking at ourselves, how can we be better human beings? That will be the greatest tribute to the memory of Professor Madhusudan Reddy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I request our chairperson to hand over the book sets to our speakers.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Makran. We meet again. Thank you. Well done. Thank you.
I have a small announcement to make that we had a great session on Savitri and poetry. I'm sure everybody is aware that Dr. Anand Reddy has been giving talks on Savitri and other books of Sri Aurobindo, and especially Savitri for almost 12 to 15 years. He has given talks thrice a week or 4 times a week, and that has been recorded, and the CDs, the DVDs have come out. So those who are interested to hear him talk about Savitri, essays on the Gita, the life divine, integral education, about ego, about synthesis of yoga, the CDs are available and the orders can be placed with our sales section here. So, and another thing which Sir Ramakrishna sir has shared with us is, here is Sri Aurobindo's epic poetry rendered in music, in Hindustani classical music. And if anybody is willing to purchase this, can give their names to our sales section again. And it is, this has come out by, the trust has already put to Hindustani classical music, book 11 and 12 of Sri Aurobindo's Savitri, published the same. The total cost, okay, they have given the cost of how much they have incurred on this, but this is book 11 and 12. So anybody interested in Hindustani classical music on Savitri may buy this. Now our next speaker, the final speaker of the day, is Dr. Anand Reddy. We all know quite a bit about him, but for those who are new and do not know, I will just read out a short passage on him. Dr. Anand Reddy, the director of Sri Aurobindo Center for Advanced Research, Pondicherry, and chairman of Institute of Human Study, Hyderabad, is a speaker and writer of great repute, especially among those who know of Sri Aurobindo. He has dedicated his life in reading, writing, and speaking about Sri Aurobindo and the Mother across the world. Dr. Reddy studied in Sri Aurobindo International Center of Education until his graduation in 1969, after which he served in Auroville for a few years. In 1980, he resumed his studies and completed MA in English and Philosophy. He was awarded PhD on Sri Aurobindo's Philosophy of Physical Transformation in 1988 by Madras University. Dr. Reddy chose not to walk the straight path of becoming a professor in a university and getting promoted year by year. To get experience, he did teach in Pondicherry University and then in Assumption University, Bangkok, as professor of philosophy and English literature for some time. But he chose to leave them and start his own research institute in Pondicherry, which was initially envisioned by Professor V. Madhusudan Reddy. Sir is an acclaimed scholar and speaker in the integral thought of Sri Aurobindo and has given workshops in various centers and universities in Europe and America. Along with being a scholar of Sri Aurobindo's thought, he has done in-depth study of Indian culture, Indian and Western philosophy, literature, social thought, yoga, and spirituality. He has been honored with 2 awards for his scholarship in Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo Puraskar, given by Sri Aurobindo Bhavan, Kolkata, 2004. Oro Ratna Award, given by Obermann Foundation, Kolkata, 2013. He has, to his credit, talks on Sri Aurobindo's major works, which are now being transcribed into books. 4 volumes of his Deliberations on the Life Divine have already been printed, and others would come out subsequently. He has authored innumerable articles and papers, of which he himself does not have a count. Dedicated at the service of the Mother and Sri Aurobindo, Dr. Reddy continues his talks and classes and research. He would be speaking about the transformative yoga relating to Sri Aurobindo's synthesis of yoga. So,
but before Anand Bhai speaks, I think one kind of introduction was given by Shruti, and that's an important introduction, but in this gathering it's not enough, because I think when a person speaks, there are certain qualities that I think in a gathering of this kind has to be acknowledged, because people are so modest, they don't talk about themselves. Once Mother was asked, and Mother said, "You want to know the worth of a person, a man," and you're talking about man, it said, "Give him a lot of money and a lot of power, and then the real nature of the man will come." She was so right. Give him a lot of money and a lot of power. And of course, some people added women and sex, etc. the weaknesses that men have got. And that is included in power itself, because money also includes all those things. So she was very right that most human beings can be good in their normal circumstances. Give them power and give them money. And that is one question that the mother had asked. Secondly, I formulated different question for my sake, and I asked, you want to know the worth of a person, man and woman, ask them to handle differences in viewpoint. How do they handle a point of view which is radically different from theirs? I think the true worth will come. This is almost like an aphorism which I have got for myself and which I think is instructive for all of us. We are so fond of self-love, solipsistic, narcissistic, and when we ask people, how do you like it? We want basically a confirmation of our own self. We are not prepared to think of an alternative viewpoint, to say the least. But in Anand Bhai, I have seen over the years, and this has to be stated, that when there is a difference in point of view, there is a gentle smile of acceptance. And I see that happening in the case of Professor Madhusudan Reddy. I have never seen him angered. In our own circle also there are differences. Once I said, when we were having a seminar in American Studies Research Center, I said, Anand Bhai, let us have an experiment in having a secular crowd. Let us not have the photograph of the mother in Sri Aurobindo. So in the beginning he was a little startled and shocked. I said, all right Sachin, let's have that experiment also. Because I said to Anand Bhai, how does it matter if Sri Aurobindo and the mother's photograph are not there? Are they not in our own heart? They're there. If not having the photograph is going to make some people feel secure, so be it. We agreed with that. How many of the Aurobindians are they going to agree with this? They are not going to agree. So in those notes of acknowledgement, may I now invite Anand Bhai, Dr. Reddy, to give his address.
Dear friends, much introduction has been given about me, both by Shruti and Sachin. Well, I do not know if I can really prove all that, but I would like to start from where the last speaker ended. In fact, I'd like to try and give a reply to Makran's question. And I think, Shruti, you should not take all this into my account. I'm just answering Makran. When my talk begins, you start the click. So, you see, Makran had a very important question, role of science in this transformation. And as I've chosen the topic transformative yoga, maybe I can attempt an answer for that, and still out of the time. You see, towards the end of mother's life, we often heard her tell Satprem, maybe others too, that she said, let me complete 100 years. She was very eager to touch 100 years of her physical existence. We don't know the mystery about that. But then in the previous talks we also heard her say that I need time. You see, for the transformation itself to happen, she wanted the physical body to last much longer. 100 was the minimum, maybe from 100 years something will start. So she was very eager that the physical body must go on longer, maybe 150 years or 2 years, 200 years, whatever. So that what she was trying, that is to bring out the supramental consciousness from the self, itself can succeed. So here I think there is a clue. What Makran spoke about, the nanotechnology, the advanced nanotechnology trying to give us a longer life, replacement of organs, blah, 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 anything you do. But all that you're trying to trying to do is to prolong the physical body by whatever means. And so this does not go contradictory to what spirituality, what Sri Aurobindo is wanting to do. Because the mother wants a physical body which does not collapse the body, and especially the joint, especially she wanted the spine. She had no solution to the spine. She says, if the spine is lost, if the bones are taken off, the whole body collapses. So how do I replace the spine? So she had very scientific questions, practical questions. How do I make the spine? How do I have the organs? How do I have the organs fail, the heart fails, the lung fails? So here is where nanotechnology could come up help. And replacing the organs and all that, it can make the body still function. And that was the outer scaffolding as if which was necessary for the mother's work to continue and to succeed. And one of the reasons perhaps is my guess, don't take it as a last word, is that her own body could not stand. In fact, I take the clue from what Nolila said, that her physical body has done the best. It couldn't survive longer the pressure of the mother's work. So it gave in and the mother had to leave that body. So here I feel there is a linking point. So I do support very much the nanotechnology trying to prolong the physical existence of the human body. And whatever the philosophers are saying, telling us, this Renaissance, humanism, etc., all that philosophical thought is outside. But I am more interested in the science, techniques, technology and yoga coming together, and they are complementary to each other. So when I read the papers, the scientists trying to do that, I said, voila, they are going on the right path. Because they are going to meet at a point where the mother's work will succeed. And the other thing was, the mother in one of her visions says, that the ultimate transformation of the Superman, or the ultimate Superman will be born not from the physical, not from this transformation of this body that you and me can touch and feel, but she says there will be a time when the psychic being will come forward, and it will come. At present, we call it in the Upanishadic language, Angushta Matra, is that our psychic being or Atman is only as big as the Angushta. But then she says it will grow so much that it will come out of the body, and that body would be the supramental body. What she calls this, the substance itself would be psychic. Right? That vision, and now let's put the yogic and the scientific body. So the scientific body has to last to that point by age-wise, so that the psychic in a sadhaka, not you and me, in a sadhaka, given sufficiently long life, where the psychic being develops and then one day it bounces out of the physical. But for this bouncing out of the physical, the body has to be there. So given the present body full of diseases and all that, the psychic may never have the chance to come forward and replace the physical body. So there also I feel the scientist is right in trying to give us the physical body. The scientist, the nanotechnology cannot give us the consciousness required, but the yogi, the Aurobindonian yogi, will give us the consciousness, and science will give us the external body. When they conjoin, there will be the birth of the supramental new body. So I feel that's my understanding to Martin's question. And also he mentioned about the mind of light. Makran has raised better questions than given answers. So I'm more interested in those questions. This mind of light, yes, Sri Aurobindo wrote as one of his last writings in 1949-50. What is this mind of light? It's not, you see, we have different layers of mind, what we call the element mind, intuitive mind, etc., etc., higher mind, etc. The mind of light is not one of those layers or tiers of mind. It is a physical or a physical mind imbued with a supramental consciousness. So let us not confuse it with a higher mind, illumined mind, intuitive mind, over mind. This is the level that all of us have. But what Sri Aurobindo does as a last gift to humanity is that he has created a mind which is now penetrated with the supramental light itself. So instead of we going up to the supramental level and the consciousness, he has brought down the supermind and consolidated in a mind consciousness. So that is what I think Makarand was referring to, that our next stage of evolution would be two-pronged. One, either you go into the psychic being, contact your psychic being, and then you become that psychic personality. That means you get guided by your psychic being. Or the other one is to get into this mind of light and be guided by the supramentalized mind, if I can put it that way, yeah. Supramentalized mind. So you have two channels. Those of you who are courageous enough, go up the level through meditation and all that, get into the mind of light. And those of us who are of the bhakti type, get into the psychic being and let the psychic being guide us. Those will be the criteria of the new race. Not yet the Superman, but the new race which is just beyond you and me. You raise your hand, you can touch it, but your hand has to be long enough. That's the only problem. Yeah? Well, now the count begins. So that's the answer if I can apply. Now, when I was making this program for the seminar, I was a little hesitant to see where is my slot. Then I said, let me be the last speaker. Obviously for two advantages. One, the chairman can extend a little bit of more time for me, beyond the 45 minutes. Because after this, after all, going home, and so they have already given you tea and biscuits. So I can request the chairperson and the anchor lady there to say, give me some freedom. But secondly, the real reason was, all the aspects that you have spoken about, be it Savitri, the social activist, or disturbing this vision of these contemporary issues, and even what Makarand spoke about Savitri, all those aspects themselves in reality to this singular aspect of Sri Aurobindo, that is Sri Aurobindo, the Mahayogi, the Maharishi. Because, as somebody already mentioned, I think, I think Makarand was reading it out. You see, what all Sri Aurobindo has written, it is an embodied experience. It is not at all a mental, fanciful, imaginative, hopeful, goodwill writing, not at all. As we say in Sanskrit, it is a Pashyanti Vak. It has nothing to do with our mental conversations. What he has seen, he has spoken. What he has seen, he has written. So my point is, all that the vision of the future, the supermind, the new race, the golden children coming down the amber stairway, anything, all about his social activity, everything was hooked to his development of his consciousness. Without that, he wouldn't be the same Sri Aurobindo. So the first thing he did was, perhaps, I can't be saying with an authority, but that's my little understanding. So he essentially focused on the change of his own consciousness. And that is why the only word repeating endlessly like a clock that ticks every minute is only one word: change of consciousness. Be it the mother or Sri Aurobindo, they talk nothing else apart from change your consciousness and everything will change. So if you can grasp that idea, then you see that all that humanity has done till now it collapses. I mean, all the theories, all the revolutions have no meaning. But they have a meaning in the sense that they have been preparatory to Sri Aurobindo's work. Yeah, to that extent I can agree. But otherwise, why are we in a log jam now? You call it violence, you call it the issues that Sachi has brought about, you call whatever is happening, people are referred to Iraq war, Iran war, the 298 people killed. All that points to only one question. Sri Aurobindo has written it many a time. There have been social revolutions, industrial revolutions, cultural revolutions, religious revolutions, call what all you want to. But it says nothing has succeeded to change man. We have passed from one event to another, more gruesome, terrifying than the previous one, but we haven't learned a lesson. So what is important, he says, until and unless you change your consciousness, nothing will happen. In fact, what he calls the spiritual revolution. Until that comes in, and that, if we do not consciously realize, nature is going to bring it out to us through tsunamis of destruction. What Sachi in the morning said with the Hiroshima bomb, suddenly you wake up and you say, what the hell is all that? Why is that bomb? So that is the situation that, once the mother was asked, Sri Aurobindo himself wrote what Sachi and the other people referred to the human cycle, their last words. If humanity does not consent to be spiritualized, then it will be forced to do under crushing circumstances. Cataclysms. So do we want those cataclysms? Once a major tsunami a few years back, what has happened to our existence. Cities and people have been washed away in blacks. So they did warn us that if you don't listen to good words of the yogis, of the avatars, of the vibhutis, of the great visionaries, then humanity will be forced to change through tsunamis and cataclysms. So that is where Sri Aurobindo comes into picture. And we may be having endless seminars, but unless we try, as I was told in the morning, are we ready to really make the effort? And here is where Sri Aurobindo has contributed immensely. What is that effort? Because if we make the effort, then he and she, Sri Aurobindo and the mother, are only eager to help you. Eager, if I can use the word, anxious. If only we can just take out our hand from our pockets and say, oh mother. You just take out. You do not even stretch them out to really pray to them. So that is the eagerness with which Sri Aurobindo and the mother are waiting for us. And here, he has shown us the way. And that way is called integral yoga or transformative yoga. But I would again preface, before I take up the yoga itself, preface the talk with what Sri Aurobindo himself did as part of his yoga. You see, in the Gita, we have three wonderful words. Sri Krishna sums up with three beautiful words: Sayujya Mukti, Salokya Mukti, and Sadrishya Mukti. These are the culmination of the yoga of the Gita. And as I analyze Sri Aurobindo's own yoga, I see that Sri Aurobindo himself achieved these three. What Sri Krishna had told Arjuna, it is Sri Aurobindo who achieved these. And it is this achievement which is the significance in my understanding of 1926, 24 November. What do I mean by all that? You see, in the Gita, Sri Aurobindo himself writes a note saying, what is this Sahajya Mukti? In which one becomes free and even in its separation, even in the duality. That means there is an unbroken contact of the individual in all its parts with the divine. So friends, Sahayuj, you know, as this union. So the very first effort of the Gita was to have the contact with the divine. The word is Sahayuj, only the contact. But it is easy to say the word only, but it requires a lot of other things to do. But I'm not going into all that. So Sri Aurobindo first practiced this Sahajya Mukti. Then there is another word called the Salokya Mukti, by which the whole conscious existence dwells in the same status of being as the divine. So there is Saloka, the Loka, that the person begins to live consciously in that Loka, the world of the Brahman. And Sri Aurobindo himself writes a letter in mid-20s or 30s in a reply to somebody. He says, I'm constantly living in Brahmic consciousness. So you have already achieved this Salokya Mukti. And then the third part is the Sadharmya Mukti, where there is a complete and final release of all. The liberation of the consciousness from the transitory mode of the ego and its unification with the one being. The third level is the transformation, where there is this whole being gets transformed. And typically in Sri Aurobindo's life, these are the three stages that you find. From 1904 to 1910, we find the first stage being practiced, the Sahajya Mukti. In all his writings we see this constant contact with the divinity. Be it his writings, be it his Vande Mataram, be it his poetry, be it his drama, be it his experiences, be it his experience by doing pranayama. Everywhere the attempt was to contact. What he had, the question of meditation with Lele, everything, all that comprises from 1904 to 1910 when it comes to Pondicherry. There has been this stage of the Sahayuj, contacting the divine. Then there is a Salokya from 1910 to 1920, when there is the question of purification, intense tapasya of purification. First stage was that of the aspiration, where there is the Sahayujya, is you aspire to connect with the divine. Second portion is where you are rejecting, where you are purifying, that's a stage of rejection. And the third stage, which all of you must have guessed by now, is the surrender, which is essential for Sadharmya Mukti, for this transformation. Why is surrender necessary for transformation? It is absolutely necessary because transformation is not done by you. The first two stages is your cup of tea. Is what Sri Aurobindo and the mother call it the personal effort. The third one, to transform your outer nature, try as much as you may, you will never succeed. Because that stage of transformation is taken over by the divine. In the case of integral yoga, by the mother. And when will they take it over? When can she take it over? When you surrender. All of you are watching, most of you I suppose, Mahabharata these days. And you know the story of Draupadi. As long as she was confident of her husband's strength, hoping that a human, invaluable, valorous husband could protect her, she did not succeed. It is only the absolute surrender when she leaves her sari and then implores Lord Krishna, then comes the help. So that is the notion, interpretation of Sadharmya, where surrender becomes an absolute necessity. So these three things that he himself experienced, that he puts in the small book, The Mother, and said there are three absolute necessities of integral yoga: aspiration, rejection, surrender. So I'm trying to tell you, these are not his words, these are the essence of his own experience, the three stages of his own life, spiritual life. And therefore, after 1920, there begins the transformation of Sri Aurobindo. Because in 1920 comes in the mother, the Supreme Aditi as the mother. And Sri Aurobindo does not hesitate in writing that until the mother came to Pondicherry, back to Pondicherry, his yoga of transformation does not begin. Not in the same words, but meaning the same. So you see, from 1920 onwards till 1950, there was a constant transformation of his own being and outer nature. And I find what we are doing here today is about his writings: Human Cycle, Ideal Humanity, Life Divine, Savitri, and a number of these, Subrahmanyam Manifestation, all the writings. If you will go through this historicity of the writing, you will see these three phases very clearly. The first phase, when he was doing this contact, there was not much great writing. There were a few dramas, some poetry, but you could always see the touch of something higher. When even he wrote the poem Love and Death, it was a pre-1910 period, but still there was this touch of a divinity. There was human love, there's passion, there's description, everything. But it's yet not the same. They're just beyond the boundary of the scintillating physical sensuality. So when you read the sensuality, so-called passages from Love and Death, you see it is not all that sensuous. So there is a touch of the divine. But then you come from 1910 to 1920, these major, massive works of Sri Aurobindo, Life Divine, Savitri, Human Cycle, Future Poetry, Vedas, Upanishads, all these books. And they have absolutely this question of constant divinity and absolute purification. And as Sri Aurobindo said, I am constantly living in the Brahmic consciousness. So friends, when you read these books, you are not reading a printed, published book. As somebody told me, I think Ramakrishna, when he came home last night, he gave me something. He said, Annam is Brahman. That means this whole of this form, all this manifestation is nothing but a form and appearance of the Brahman. You know, if many of you must have gone to Rajasthan palaces, if you see, most of these palaces have dancing halls. When a dancer is dancing in the center of this hall, or big room, not a hall, you see there are thousands of mirrors in the hall, in the room, and the walls. So one lady is dancing and you see 1,000 images dancing. That is exactly this world. It's not you and me who are dancing and acting. It is a single consciousness, it is a single Brahman who is acting, and we see in one of those mirrors my image. And I think I am dancing, and I think I am acting, I think I am crying, I think I am suffering, I think I am enjoying. But the Vedic truth is, that image in the mirror is not you, is actually the dancer. The central dancer is only one. That is why we say there is only one consciousness. We are all images of the same Supreme Brahman. So therefore we would say, friends, that writings from 1910 to 1920, which I am urging you to read in the original, are not just words of a philosopher or of a yogi. They are the imprints of a consciousness that is constantly living in Brahman. That is the prerogative that you will have if you read Sri Aurobindo in the original. Hardly is there any other human being living or in the past or in the future who can claim that. Everything is an imprint of the Brahmic consciousness. And then the last period, 1920 to 1950, where there was a transformation already beginning of the nature. That is where Savitri comes in. That is why Savitri is written the last book of Sri Aurobindo. There are other essays, but as a book, that is the last book. Why did he write it last? Because Savitri required not only a constant contact, living in Brahman, but an absolute purification, an absolute surrender, an absolute transformation of human nature. To the extent that there is no mind, no vital, hardly physical ego, the whole of Sri Aurobindo was nothing but an embodied consciousness of surrender to the Supreme. So Savitri flew in, dropped in. He could see the lines as we see in a screen of iPad, lines rolling down and Sri Aurobindo was seeing. That's why Savitri cannot be translated. And that's what the mother said, with all due respect to Professor T. Ramakrishna. It cannot be translated because it is not being given by the mind. You can perhaps translate many a book, but you cannot translate a consciousness. It is not a word you can have in the dictionary, in your encyclopedia and Wikipedia, all the meanings of the words. But Savitri is not a word. It's a dhvani. It is a vibration. So Sri Aurobindo writes in his book, in his letters, when Amal Kiran asked him, he says, no, people will not be able to understand Savitri until and unless they raise themselves to the consciousness that is required. So it is not this, and then people have gone with translation to the mother. It's perhaps only the mother who could touch the consciousness and get back those vibrations, that dhvani, that omkara, which translates itself into word formations. And that's why she even had forbidden people to try and translate it. But just last night, Ramakrishna Garu told me, he has taken the trouble. But if he has translated, he has grown in his consciousness. My Amma writes that Savitri, she doesn't understand a sentence, but she copies a page of Savitri every night before going to bed. She doesn't understand. So it is not a question of language. But by doing so, this professor has translated in 15 months. This uneducated lady, my Amma, she just copied. But what we gain is that we are connecting to that vibration and that consciousness. So how many of us understand the Gita? But we repeat all those slokas and verses. So these epics, these vakyas, mahavakyas that have come down to us are not meant for man's mind. Mother had in fact warned, saying, nobody can understand Savitri, no man. It is only the future race of the supramental man, new race which can understand. So let us not be in this illusion that if I read a translation I will understand. No, you will not. My Babu used to say about a lady who was a completely illiterate person, but when she read Savitri, she heard Sri Aurobindo's voice reading out Savitri for her. Another lady used to see blue light in the pages of Savitri, and there was the physical presence of Sri Aurobindo and the mother. So don't give us, or give me, or I should not give myself the excuse that I can't understand. Obviously, if you try to understand, you'll be bored. So the basic thing is, as it is said always, the scripture reveals itself to those who pray for this revelation. And that's what the mother had told Sadhak there, who complained, Mother, I don't understand the life divine. She said, go and put it on the samadhi and ask Sri Aurobindo to reveal it to you. So the author reveals. If only we can pray, O Lord, reveal thyself. So Savitri is not meant to be understood. Savitri is supposed to get the dhvani, the vibration. And that's thing, because who understands? When I read this language, my mind understands, because there's a language here. Supramentalization is the ultimate stage of integral yoga. But Savitri is not mental. It is almost close to supramental and overmental. So who can understand that? One which is within us, the instrument of that consciousness. The supreme consciousness is within you. That will understand something, not this mind and the emotion and the heart. No. So what you do is best. Let the dhvani, let the voice of the words get into your ears, translate into the soul. Because it's the soul that understands. So it is for your spiritual growth. That's Savitri meant for. And that Mahavakya he wrote in the last section of his yoga. So that is how I feel Sri Aurobindo, he became the yoga, the sadhak of the Gita par excellence. Arjuna is nowhere to be compared. The secret was given to Arjuna, but the one who succeeded was Sri Aurobindo. So that is why I would say this is what Sri Aurobindo did himself, and then he gives humanity in simple language, in straight formula, if I can use the word, a synthesis of yoga, wherein he says, I'll give you in simple words the process. So this is where comes the question of integral yoga, and which I have chosen, which I have purposely chosen to word as transformative yoga, because there are hundreds of yogas in India which have tried to take man to a higher level of consciousness. But what have they done? Put the characteristics. What have they done? They have basically withdrawn from earth and life. And they said, I will take you to the Supreme. I will give you a kind of a identification with the Supreme. And so all the yogas, most of the yogas, try to do that, including your Vedas, including your Tantra, including your Gita. Why am I mentioning these three? Because whenever we use the word integral philosophy or integral yoga, there are people who immediately bring in saying, oh, Sri Aurobindo is nothing but a synthesis of Vedas and the Tantra and the Gita. Sri Aurobindo himself writes, yes, these are necessary on the way. Remember the word. He says Tantra or Veda or the Gita, he has taken the principal elements to prepare you on the way. It's a beautiful phrase. I was shell-shocked when I heard the word, saw the word. There are necessary steps on the way, necessary steps to transformative yoga. And people for thousands of years we have discussed about the Vedanta, about the Tantra and about the Gita. And Sri Aurobindo takes the essence of these three great paths. And the essence is, from the Vedas, he says you take up the experience of connecting the cosmic consciousness. What in the Vedas is given as the gods and goddesses, you invoke Agni and Varuna and Mitra and Vayu and Surya. They are nothing but the cosmic consciousness. The Sri Aurobindo says in his yoga also it is necessary to connect the cosmic consciousness. What in other words you would call spiritualization. So there is the essence of the Vedas. And then there is the essence of the Tantra too. What does it say? The Tantra says you have to transform your lower nature. But Tantras use only one energy, the sex energy in the human body, which is not sufficient for a transformation. So Sri Aurobindo says, what I have taken from the Tantra is this essential thing of controlling your desires, your body instincts, your attachments, all that is required even in daily yoga. And then he says about the Gita. Because there is, reading the synthesis of yoga, people say, well, there are 4 parts in the synthesis of yoga. Yoga of works, yoga of love, yoga of knowledge. and perfect yoga or perfection of integral yoga, the last section. Friends, it is not the synthesis of the Gita. Sri Aurobindo says, in my integral yoga, there is the necessity of the Gita's yoga of knowledge. What is the knowledge? To discriminate between the appearance and reality, between Purusha and Prakriti, between the outer and the inner, between the outer being and inner personality. This discrimination you should be able to do. That is the yoga of works. And I have taken only that much, nothing more, would say Sri Aurobindo. And from the Gita you take the Bhakti Yoga. People when you speak about the Bhakti Yoga, they say, what is the difference between Gita and Sri Aurobindo? They both speak of Bhakti and Manmana Bhava Bhakta Madhyajimam Namastu. Become my-minded, my devotee, my disciple. What is the difference? Gita is telling that, Sri Aurobindo is telling, no friends. Sri Aurobindo says, become my-minded, become my disciple, only because that is the training of the heart to surrender to the divine, which is the most important word in Sri Aurobindo's yoga. You begin with surrender, you end with surrender. So Sri Aurobindo would say, no, I am training you to the path of the Gita to be able to surrender. Devotion is required, but that is only a means and an on-the-way business. And the third one, Karma Yoga, which whole of India quotes freely. Well, Karma Yoga is not one who does this karma. We are all Karma Yogis in that way. We all do 14 hours of work, 15 hours of work, 8 hours of work. But that's not Karma Yoga. But Karma Yoga is one who is using his karma, his action, for uniting yoga, uniting with the divine. But what are we doing? We are doing karma 8 hours, 10 hours, 15 hours for self-interest. So I can get a better improvement, a better hike in my salary next month. Because my boss will be appreciating and say, look, this fellow does great work, give him an increment, 2 increments. I hope Sita is not listening to me. So don't go by especially your principles and Sita and Gita and Chala and Amma. Don't say, oh, my teacher is working, there's a seminar and Sita, Chala would say, Anna, this group work for 15 hours a day. Well, good. But that's not karma yoga. It's only karma. And karma, in other words, is your karma. It's not divine karma. It's only when you offer it, the two ways that yoga becomes karma yoga. When you do all the karma, not for self-interest, but for Godward movement. When you want to enhance your Godward direction, you want to or go faster on the path. The other way is, when you offer all your karma consciously, constantly to the divine, then all your karmas are washed out. There is no imprint of your karma. So Sri Aurobindo says, I want people to do karma yoga, but not in this sense of becoming great yogis, loka for the world, etc. You do it for the sake of the divine. So Sri Aurobindo acknowledges that there is Veda and the Tantra and the Gita, but on the way. Once you have become a Gita yogin, Tantra master or a Vedantic, then you are prepared for Sri Aurobindo's yoga, not before. Then begins the transformation. And that is how from 1926, 24th November, when Sri Krishna acknowledges almost in a different way that, oh Sri Aurobindo, oh Aurobindo Ghosh, you are now mine, my consciousness. Because you have achieved these three, Sadishya Mukti, Salokya Mukti and Sadharma Mukti, then you are eligible to be on the road to the Supermind. Not before. So Sri Aurobindo had to do the Gita Yoga right from the beginning. Somebody was telling me this morning about a jail. Even prior to going to jail, where he had the Vishwakarma Darshana, Vishwarupa Darshana. Even before that, Sri Aurobindo was closely allied with Sri Krishna. So friends, here begins the transformative yoga. And for that, I can run you through very important points just in brief, because although I have deducted my question answer session, I still have to keep to my own session. And here I have given you some help there, so that I don't have to talk to you too much about things. You can read a few things there, but I'm not going to read out all that, because I was warned by your anchor. She said, if you read out what is there on the screen, you are the worst speaker I have ever heard. So I'll not read out there, but just for your benefit, the three sections I have divided that into: aim, method and result. Well, what is this aim of integral yoga? Is the complete transformation of the lower nature. What is the method? It's a method where you follow aspiration, rejection and purification. But this method is unique in the sense that for the first two levels, aspiration and rejection, you are the doer. You are making the effort. You are the sadhak. But then, as the Gita says, in the first level you are the doer, you are the ahankar, you have the ego that I am so and so, I am directing, I am teaching, I am this and that. But second stage, Sri Krishna himself says, you are not the doer, you are only the instrument. And that instrument level can come only when you are purified, when there is rejection of the vital, rejection of the mental, rejection of the physical. Not the physical body and the mental body, no. It is the rigidities of the mind, the darknesses and the falsehoods of the vital, the physical tamas. When the negative aspects of the mind, vital, physical are rejected, then and then only you become an instrument. So let no one of us think that we are the instruments of Mother and Shiva who work. We are a million miles away from being instruments. We are only aspirants. Oh Ma, let me have a chance. In fact, one of the prayers that I read from the Mother Shiva says, don't pray to the divine that let thy will be done, which we think is a great thing, and we say, I'm a great sadhak. Oh Mother, let thy will be done. She says, no. All that is mental fallacy. The sincere thing is, she says, in the morning when you get up and go to the Mother and show them the photo, she says, pray that, oh Mother, that whatever work that I'm going to do this day, let it be done to my best capacity. But she doesn't add one line in the paragraph which we could add. Let me do what all I am doing to my best capacity and consciousness between paragraph and offer it to thee. If I can add after reading all of the Mother, if I can say and offer it to thee, that is the only prayer, she says. Don't think of all this, let thy will be done, you are the Mother, you know all those are mental arguments. So therefore, the method is, let her do the work, then you become the instrument. So the secret of this yoga is that to a point, you have to put in your personal effort. Beyond that, it's the Mother who becomes the sadhak and the sadhana. Whereas in the old yogis, including that of the Gita, the Tantra, the Veda, you never gave your sadhana to the divine. You sat for 10 hours of meditation, you sat for all the going to the temple, doing the bhajan for 10 hours. No. She says, no, don't do that. Let the Mother be the sadhak and the sadhana. There is no yoga in the world till now who has said that the divine himself be the sadhak and the sadhana. Every yoga says, do this, do that puja, do this meditation, do this kriya, do that karma. That's what gives hope Sri Aurobindo Nama's yoga. So that is the method that you can follow, or we should follow, not you. There's no, I'm as much an ignorant fool as Paula Pazaria. Well, that is this method. And what is the goal, the realization that we have? You see, there are so many ways to go from here to Delhi. You can fly, you can go by train, you can go by car, you can go by motorcycle, you can go by cycle, you can be able to walk. But the way you go, the manner you go, if you take a flight, you have to save time, you have capital, you have to spend money. But when you fly, you don't know what's happened on the earth. You have missed the beauty of the earth, you missed the rivers and the beautiful fields and the waters and the flowers. You have not smelled the earth. You have missed great things. So Sri Aurobindo would say, I would walk the way from here to Delhi because I want to smell the planet Earth, as somebody was calling it. Because he says, I want to breathe this commonality. I don't want to escape the suffering and the sorrow by going by the flight, which was done by Shankara. He took a jet flight, went straight to Brahman, and he went so far that he could not even see the earth. So he said, my God, there's no earth, earth has vanished, so earth is an illusion, and therefore the Maya. Sri Aurobindo said, no, I will walk the way and talk the way. So that is why Sri Aurobindo is so close to earth. That is why today now there's a new fashion, as was spoken Purushottam Reddy there, that Sri Aurobindo is there to save the planet Earth. Well, that is not the environmental attitude, but Earth as a consciousness. Because he knows the sorrows and the suffering, and Savitri is one of those extraordinary reflections of Earth's suffering. I mean, you do not know yourself as much as Sri Aurobindo has given about your image in Savitri. Because he has smelled. You see there's a rain there, he can smell the rain. But if you go by flight, you won't know. Well, lastly, as I said, what is the goal? Result? Result is you know all the facets of the divine. If you take one flight, if you, for example, you are a devotee, there's a great Mirabai, she knew only one aspect of the divine, the devotional aspect, where she saw Lord Krishna as part of her own consciousness. But divine is not just bhakti. He is knowledge. He is master of works. He is there sitting beside you. He is giving you the delight of existence. What Sri Aurobindo calls in the synthesis of yoga, Ananda Brahman. Can Meera have the Ananda Brahman? Did Meera have the Ananda Brahman? She had the Ananda of Lord Krishna. Because Krishna represents this divine bliss. But Ananda Brahman is all manifested here in all these forms. And Nityananda Yoga says, I will give you Ananda Brahman. The divine within, the divine without, the divine around, the divine above, the divine below. So it all depends on what path you take. So if you take all the paths enunciated by Sri Aurobindo's integral yoga, you will have the realization of integral divine. So integral yoga results in integral realization of the divine. So that is a much fuller aspect, much rich realization of the divine. You don't neglect earth, you don't abandon life, but whereas life itself becomes the delight of existence, a beautiful chapter in the life divine. But ultimately this, I also had taken the technique of our young friend Karan Pai by asking a question. Karan Pai is not able to hear me, but I'm telling him a question. The thing is, what Sri Aurobindo has promised or is telling us will be the future as declared by or described by him about supramental future. Although we said it is an experience that Sri Aurobindo himself had, Savitri is full of those descriptions, where there is a brilliant description of the new. And whenever you are dull in spirit, and this is depressed, disillusioned, things are not going too good, read Savitri. Because Savitri is dipped in Sri Aurobindo's bliss. You touch it and you get the bliss of Brahman. And so we see is Sri Aurobindo fantasizing about the supramental. He says, I am experienced, but will you believe in it? You said Christ also spoke about the city of God. He also, the other scriptures also speak about it. The great heaven coming upon earth. The Vedas have spoken about the heaven upon earth. What's new about Sri Aurobindo? And why should I believe in Sri Aurobindo? Christ has said nothing has happened 2,300 years apart. Buddha has spoken about. Everyone has spoken about. So one more man called Sri Aurobindo or Aurobindo Ghosh talked about it. What do you think about it? Why should I believe? But that's the question. But I will give the answer myself, not leave it to Bharat Bhai. The answer is that I have lived the day when the mother brought down that force, that consciousness called the supramental consciousness. Till now, it was a probability. What all the great ancient rishis, avatars, vibhutis have spoken of was a probability. But now it is an absolute, where Sri Aurobindo, in fact, tomorrow when you see our slides, Sri Aurobindo answers A.V. Purani. When A.V. Purani asked him about the independence, Purani was so involved in the freedom movement. He says, I cannot join the ashram because I am worried about the freedom of the country. Sri Aurobindo says, do not worry, you can join the ashram and yoga because India's freedom is taken care of. A.V. Purani doesn't believe, he's too new to Sri Aurobindo. He says, how will I believe India's independence is guaranteed? Sri Aurobindo keeps quiet and then says, I assure you that India will be free. So that I assure you was the absolute assurance, but as Sachi was telling, the mind intervenes. Finally, while he was going away, the mind comes back and says, how do I know? Can I believe Sri Aurobindo's I assure you? Then he returns to Sri Aurobindo and asks the same question. How can I believe even you? Then Sri Aurobindo closes his eyes and then opens and looks into the future and he says, I see it as clearly as the rising sun tomorrow. That is Sri Aurobindo's assurance. It is that same man who in 1950 brought down the Superman. It is the same power which again in 1956 was brought down by the mother. And they have made not a promise, not a hope, but to tell us if only we can wait with hope and confidence that is going to come as sure as tomorrow's sunrise. It may be that our lives are not tuned with the tomorrow, but it matters not. You see, that is the vision, the path, the assurance, the consciousness. And that is why Sri Aurobindo and the mother, they are the only beings in whom I have faith. I do not have faith in Brahman or Indra or Varuna or anybody, because they are the Brahman consciousness manifest in front of me. And one of them I was fortunate enough to talk to write to put my head upon her feet, to put my head upon her knees and cry out my pain. And she blessing me with both her hands on my head. So they are my divinity. And tomorrow you will have a session of darshan of divinities with Mother and Sri Aurobindo. Some of the sadhaks who have seen the Mother and Sri Aurobindo, they have given us their impressions. We have selected a few and we are going to show you tomorrow. And you will see that what I have told you just now was experienced by many, not only by many, by any and everyone who came in contact with them. It is not a wishful thinking, it is not a fanatic belief. It is a reality of our life. So tomorrow we will see that, and then we will have one last hour of tributes to Professor Reddy, who has been instrumental in showing many of us the road to the sunrise of tomorrow called Sri Aurobindo and Ramada. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Anand Bhai, for the beautiful exposition which combined both knowledge as well as felt experience, because you truly were fortunate to have this close interaction with the mother and your correspondence with the mother on specific aspects of yoga and your own life choices are all there for everybody to see. It is generally not known to the audience here, including the teachers who are sitting, that the first major work on Sri Aurobindo's concept of the supermind was done by Professor Madhusudhan Reddy. It is also not known that Sri Aurobindo had seen the first copy of this thesis itself. So it had his approval and it had his blessings, for example. This is a very rare thing that we are finding. And friends, we have heard from the morning till now. I would say that it's been a wonderful opportunity, a great satsang that we have had. And each one of us has also given up the important demands that are made on us by society, culture and family, and for a worthy cause. As Anand Bhai was saying, is this karma for our own benefit, our own kind of material progress and for the inner growth. And I would submit to Anand Bhai that there is no conflict of this kind, because if you look at the title of one of the novels of Hemingway, it says, loser takes it all. When we are not asking for something, you get it. When you are dispassionate and detached and do something in the spirit in which the Gita is asking us to do, you get all the rewards. On the other hand, if you are obsessive and seeking and hankering after things, we don't get it. Friends, many people will speak about their association with Professor Reddy. One of the references that I always found when he used to confide in me is that how to change the city of Hyderabad. How to bring, by that he didn't mean so much the ecology, which is important in itself. He meant how to bring the Sri Aurobindonian influence to the city of Hyderabad. Hyderabad, which has a great civilization and culture, a composite culture of its own. Why is it so resistant to Sri Aurobindo's thinking? Of course there was this experiment here, of course there are other things, but he was always comparing favorably with the neighboring state of Orissa. And he said, Oriya people may not be so well off, but the heart is very open. And when the heart is open, they are completely open to the divine, because they had the bhakti culture, they had the influence of Chaitanya, for example. It is a great help. I think the mind is a great barrier. Once he told me very humorously, he said, look at the kinds of fights which are going on in the city. On the wall of Hyderabad, at one time it was written by some evangelical people, Christ saves. The next day somebody came and wrote beneath it, if Christ saves, why couldn't he save himself? So that is a kind of a discourse which is going on. And he really referred to it. He said, you know that orbit I was telling you about, eight consciousness? Orbiting, going around, for example, internecine warfare, for example, communalism, secularism. Spirituality is hardly there in the background. He was very keen. And I would say that if Bapu was here today, he would have been so happy. He would have thoroughly approved of what is happening here itself. That the lineage, true lineage is not just the biological lineage of inheriting the property. That is how we understand. And that is a gross misnomer, disservice of the whole idea of lineage. true lineage is when you have understood the real worthwhileness of your parents and you take it forward in the communitarian spirit, in the spirit of sacrifice and renunciation. We have, for example, Professor Madhusudan Reddy. He was not hankering after benefits. Whatever he got in spite of his not hankering. He could have got more things, but he refused to do certain things. And he was not an institutional person, although he built beautiful institutions. We have in Anand Bai, for example. It's very important because when my mother died, and she was a great poet, my grandmother said, what's the point? When she was alive, people did not say good things about her. They knew that, recognized that she was a good poet, but all the good things that people are saying, the obituary, they should have said when she was alive, your mother. So I think I have always learned that whenever we are saying good things are happening, because most of the time we are really saying bad things and negative things about others. Our media is contributing to that. So whenever we are seeing a beautiful gesture, a good act, there and there itself we should acknowledge to that person and say, thank you. You made a little difference to my own life itself. So I think I am very happy that this residue of idealism which the parents have, and we are very fortunate, Radha Aunty is here. Let us salute her. She is here, and she was here to come to bless her, for example. Those things are far more important. We have heard so much about the intellectual brilliance and all that. Let me tell you, we have been here, Makran has been there, we have seen through most of these things. What is of consequence is the sincerity of effort. It's not all these kinds of, effect that one is producing over others. So I'm very happy. Once the mother said, we are very fortunate that we lived during the time of the Avatar. Just think how blessed people during Ram's time would have been, Krishna's time would have been. But friends, they were not aware. Most of these people, barring a few people, were not even aware of the greatness. Some people were aware, majority were not aware. But it's a good fortune that the mother came and told us that you are supremely blessed because you are in the presence. Those of you who haven't been born or also were born later on, doesn't matter. He lived. And everybody saw that. People today are debating whether Rama existed or not. But historicity is very important because it's a great source of inspiration to us. That's why God's labor is there. Somebody said some historian, it doesn't matter if somebody lived or not. Now archaeology and mythology has its own kind of a value. Maybe it has a value. But for ordinary human beings, the fact that somebody lived like us and suffered and made certain sacrifices and made certain decisions, did not make certain decisions, and what is the significance and import of those decisions? In what way are they going to influence our life? Those are of great consequences. So mother said that, and I think we are extremely fortunate that we lived and we have the books of the mother. When mother came there, Sri Aurobindo himself was supremely indifferent about himself. He was sharing a towel with 6 people, for example. When he would need some money, he would write a letter to Kali and say, please arrange some money for me. That is how next day the money would come. Till that time they would be wondering what to do. When the mother came, one of the first things she said is that, stop this AG business. They were referring to Sri Aurobindo as AG, meaning Aurobindo Ghosh. And all of them were sitting together because he didn't mind, etc. The same level, for example, we are sitting. And Sri mother said, stop this practice. All of you are going to sit on the floor. He will sit on the chair itself. Look at the great example of Sri Aurobindo. Have you really come across anybody so modest as that? Incredible. Completely indifferent about his own needs. And allowing everybody to sit here itself. Now if 10 people were to talk to us, we will begin to behave as if we are a guru. With all the rest of the paraphernalia. Sri Aurobindo doesn't even mind. He said, come and sit with us, for example. All of them at the same level. It's the mother who is saying, stop calling him Aurobindo Ghosh, AG. He is Sri Aurobindo. And Sri Aurobindo himself is saying, she's not Madam or Mira Alfasa. If you look at the history of the ashram, sometimes Madam, sometimes M.A. Mira Alfasa, Sri Aurobindo is saying, and she is going to be the head of the institution, much before feminism was talked about, the mother as the head of the institution. Now friends, what better examples do you have as far as human examples are concerned? On that happy note, let me really thank all of you because you have given me an opportunity For me, it was another opportunity to connect with myself. And I think I'm very happy, I'm very grateful for it. And before I think Shruti gives a vote of thanks on behalf of all of us, because that solemnity of atmosphere which has been wonderfully created. In the spirit of that, may I request all of us to maintain 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes of silence before Shruti gives the vote of thanks. Thank you. We just maintain silence for 2 minutes.
I request the chairperson to hand over a book set to Dr. Anand Reddy and Dr. Chalamai Reddy. I request Didi to come forward. Sorry, there's a little reordering. Chala Didi will first give the word of thanks and then we'll get the gift.
Thank you.
So before I commence, I think I'd like to thank Sachibai. It was a wonderful kind of a conclusion that you gave for the seminar and trying to tie up all the ends and also invoking the Mother's blessings on us. So respected guests, speakers, Didis, Bhaiyas, because it is a very unique privilege to deliver the vote of thanks on this very, very special occasion. It is not only a matter of great personal pride for me, but for all of us to celebrate this day which has voiced the many glories of our great beloved Master, Sri Aurobindo. With deep reverence, all of us present here, the members of the family of the Institute of Human Study, offer our humble homage at the lotus feet of our Master and the Mother in its Golden Jubilee year. I take this opportunity to thank the several speakers of the day who described and elaborated the many-hued aspects of Sri Aurobindo. Professor Sachidananda Mohanty never fails to impress with his scholarship and spoke eloquently about the dynamics of balancing local with global perspectives and how Tagore and Sri Aurobindo, instead of seeing it as a conflict, approached it synthetically. Professor K. Purushottam Reddy highlighted the less known yet most powerful political and activist aspect of Sri Aurobindo. Many thanks for transporting us to the fiery period of Sri Aurobindo's life during the pre-independence period. Our special thanks to Professor T. Ramakrishna Garu and Professor Paranjpe, who came all the way here to share the wonderful insights into Sri Aurobindo's poetry and his vision of the supermind. Ramakrishna Garu, we could indeed taste a very little bit of salt through the sublime ocean of poetry of Savitri, through your wonderful descriptions of the spiritual journey that Savitri took. Makarand Paranjpe spoke about Sri Aurobindo as not only an ordinary futurist, but somebody with a mother who co-scripted the destiny of mankind in the lives of human consciousness, evolving into the Gnostic being, and ended his talk with a stimulating question thrown at us of convergence of yoga, science, technology, and continental philosophy, which I think very aptly Anand Bhai was able to answer. And of course my brother, Dr. Ananda Reddy, once again brilliantly delivered his talk and clearly explained the various steps of transformative or integral yoga of aspiration, rejection, culminating in surrender. I think Professor Paranjpe was talking, he just met me during tea and he was stating of why I was looking younger and fresher. I think I should share that secret with all of you, that right since my childhood, a little bit of that gold dust from my father and then later from my brother has probably rubbed on my skin. So probably that glow is showing now. So a word of very special felicitations to Anand Bhai and especially to Dr. Shruti for the excellent editorial work done on Professor Madhusudan Reddy's books. And many thanks to the persons who chaired the sessions, Professor Sitaram Reddy Garu, K.V. Rao Garu, and of course Professor Sajidanand Bhaiya for chairing the sessions and sharing their valuable observations with us. Not to forget thanking Deepshika Didi, who transported us and set the right atmosphere with her very, very melodious invocation. And thanking all the others, technicians, Prabhanan Bhaiya, Upesh, Raveen, Malik Bhaiya, all of you, and others who lend a helping hand to make the program a happy and sincere offering at the feet of the Master and the Mother. A special thanks to Vijaya, Swati, Pratibha, and as said, all the others who really helped us to organize this program. And yes, I think a very, very special thanks to all of you wonderful audience for being very patient. Yes, sorry, I am so close to Raghav sir that I always take sir for granted. I am very, very thankful Raghav sir for sparing the entire day with us today. And of course being General Secretary, as I said, is so very close to me that I am sorry, but all my indebted thanks to you sir for also very, very I think you all have the books with you, the Telugu magazine that we are going to come up with on an annual basis. It was completely thanks to him that we were able to bring this out, and thank you sir for that wonderful work. And as said again, a wonderful thanks to all of you, audience, and we all look forward, hopefully that many of you can also turn up for tomorrow to pay our tributes to Bapu, the founder chairman, Professor V. Madhusudan Reddy. Thank you for giving me this opportunity on this very special occasion to deliver the vote of thanks. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharadi, for a wonderful vote of thanks. Now the gift time. We will, may I now request our chairperson, Professor Sachidanand Mohanty, to hand over this book set to Deepshika Didi.
How do I get it right? समझ में नहीं आ रही। एक invocation गा के तो बहुत फायदा होगा।
वही है क्या? It's actually more than the invocation, the moment behind the success.
चला दीदी। And Dr. Anand. Thank you once again for patient hearing and sitting through the whole day. And it's your patience is definitely great and admirable. Ansha. Oh yeah, right. I'm sorry again. Yeah, our chairman suggests that we give a gift to Raghav sir also.
Yes, yes, yes.
And even though Chala has thanked her team and all that, I especially thank this team of these teachers who have given this beautiful decoration. Every time I come and see this beautiful decoration, so beautifully done, you know, so much Shraddha, so much Nishtha, I just fall flat for that. And another group that I would like to thank is the group here in the guest house who made the lunch. It was a very, very good lunch with the Kubani sweet, and we're looking forward to tomorrow's lunch too. Yeah.
Well, all of you, those who can come, who would like to come, you are most welcome to come tomorrow.
Please do come.
Sunday, don't just have a long sleep, you know, there's a better luck waiting for you here. See you, bye.
Ladies who have decorated Madhumas with photographs, can you please come here?